And I think I'm live. Sorry, I'm about 4 minutes late or 5 minutes late. Oh, six. Sorry, just saw my clock. Um, had to wait for my dinner to arrive from Subway, so it'll keep. It's just a deli sandwich. Um, so I have a few things I wanted to talk to you about today. Yesterday, I was concentrating primarily on social contracts and societal norms and paradigm shifts and all those kinds of things. Today, I do want to show the one video I mentioned yesterday about the company Cisco and how, and not Cisco as in the networking engineering platform, but Cisco SYSCO, which is a restaurateur supply chain. And I think you're going to find it very, very interesting. I don't know if you've seen it before. There's actually quite a few things I want to touch on. So, in this broadcast, we're going to deal with talking about the Purple Revolution, the company that's tracking down and ruining restaurants. Yeah, this is that place that I was talking about with Cisco. Then we're going to jump over to Peter Zeihan, who is a geopoliticist who deals with economics and political systems and all that kind of stuff. Um, and he's going to talk about why things in America are going to get much, much more expensive. And then we're going to move over to a conversation between Scott Galloway, who has been on quite the campaign to bring the awareness to men's suffering and mental health issues and how they need to be addressed in the greater society. So I'm sure he'll have a very, very interesting take on it. Unlike Professor, and I'll put that in quotes, Jordan Peterson, who's a fucking idiot, um, and who just throws word salads and questions you back when you question him about something. He'll turn it around and make the question about you. He's just a moron. And you know what? They say he's in the hospital. Well, good. We won't hear from him for a while. And then we're going to listen to Patty Kay talking to people are partying less and why that should be of concern to us as a society. I'm having a feeling it has to do with social media. I'm just saying. Then I found a really fascinating take. There's this big whole thing with the Riyadh comedy festival that's going on in Saudi Arabia, and how a number of comedians are being taken to task. Bill Burr amongst the big ones, Dave Chappelle, which I don't really give a fuck about it anymore. He hasn't been funny since the '90s, um, and how a lot of them have taken these big wads of cash from the Saudi government. This is not, they're trying to promote it as ticket sales, that they're bringing free speech and free comedy to a pretty well oppressed authoritarian government and its populace. However, they aren't paid by the ticket sales. It's not like they booked a gig there. They're being paid by the Saudi government and the regime, the Saudi regime, to make it's kind of like what I likened the whole Olympics in 1936 with the Nazis. It's their way of saying we're growing, we're doing better. Yeah, you still are bone sawing people, so shut the fuck up. So you have that whole scenario breaking out, and oddly enough, Trevor Noah was doing a bit at the Comedy Cellar in New York, and somebody from the audience posed the question of what are his thoughts on the fallout of all of the comedians who have performed in Riyadh. Now, Bill Burr is crashing out hard, as the kids like to say, because he's trying to make it that if I answer your tough questions on this issue, then people are going to take it out of context and then they're going to make up their own stories. But Bill, they're doing that anyways. What are you stopping? So he has a really bizarre take on it. But Trevor Noah, I thought, had one of the most reasoned discussions about it. And he brings up some very interesting points. And I've always liked Trevor. I always found him to be very, very insightful. So I want to share with you what his thoughts are. So we will do that. Then we're going to go to why the UK's economy is awful. And this is one that I think is very interesting. And it's not very long, it's only about 17 minutes long, but they do a very succinct job of explaining how Britain has broken down. Why is that important to American audiences? Well, I think it's important because a lot of what Thatcher was doing in the late 70s through the 80s and 90s, and she was a horrible fucking prime minister. I don't care what anybody says. I remember that era like it was yesterday. Reagan was an asshole and she was a cunt. I fucking hated both of them. And I have no qualms in sharing that. So we're going to watch why the UK's economy is awful. And the reason why it's pertinent to an American audience, I think, is because a lot of that is playing out now. And where Thatcher was quite precise in her ability to deregulate and take all kinds of safeguards out of the development and how she only added to the inequality, Trump is just a fucking bull in a glass and china shop. And he's just bashing around. So there's none of the marketing finesse, as it were. They're just straight up lying. And people have caught on to the fact that they're lying. Even maggots are figuring out, oh, wait, fuck me. This is a real big mistake. So that stuff is still playing out. So then we'll wrap up with the real reason that America and the UK are falling apart. And it's on a channel called The Diary of a CEO. And this is one of the clips. So it's not a long piece, but I do have some qualms about this channel and its content. Um, it's one of these pseudo journalistic interview talking head kind of things. And I find it very, very problematic at times. I don't know that they always have the best people on with the right takes. And I'm not saying I'm trying to say you can't have your own thoughts. What I'm trying to say is that don't pass it off as legit source and expert in a certain field if that person is highly questionable. Jordan Peterson. Anyways, um, and then the final thing we're going to talk about is we're going to go to my favorite off Jawagon, where he is going to give the rundown on the whole Stephen Miller debacle that is going on. So that's kind of the play for tonight's little broadcast. Um, let's see, did I have that one? I thought I had that one queued up. I guess I didn't. Let me quickly set that up. Give me just 2 seconds here. Um, doo, doo, doo. Luckily, I have all these things saved so I can just find them and then. All righty. So let's get right into it, okay? I'm going to move over to our media page. Now, this is Tabitha Speaks Politics. She's a channel that I follow. I guess she's predominantly over on TikTok, and then she reposts here on YouTube. I find her examinations of stuff to be fairly balanced and well reasoned. What she is commenting on is the current state of a movement that is growing where a number of red voters who voted for Trump, or maybe didn't vote for Trump, but didn't also vote for Kamala, are now starting to say we need to come together because it's really the rich elites that are the problem, not our left versus right, red versus blue situation. It needs to be us, the people who the government is for, or supposed to be for. That's what it's written in the document, and not the elites that are trying to usurp it all. So, and it's called the purple movement because when you take red and blue and put them together, they make purple. So, this is her commentary on what's going on with that movement. And I find, like I said, I find her situation to be quite reasonable and quite well reasoned. So let's give her a listen and see what she has to say. Okay.
In these Purple Revolution videos, I find it very interesting. But black people, I don't think any of this is our business. hmm They're talking about the left coming together, the right coming together, blue plus red to get the purple revolution. And what they want to, they're now opening their eyes and realizing that they've been bamboozled, they've been hoodwinked.
Now, here's the thing. I understand where she's coming from with this because I do follow her channel, so I do know what her position is. At least I think I do, of where she's coming from. Um, the real issue also seems to be that a number of people have taken this. Well, let me see if I can find her name. I've been following her channel too. Let's see, there's Knitting Cult Lady. There is. I'm trying to see who else there. I can find that. Cult College, this woman right here. She and this veteran who was a Republican who used to vote for him, for Trump and the rest of them, and was pretty pro MAGA, have decided that they are going to step up to the plate together and create this purple movement. And he's trying to bring a lot of right-leaning voters in. And at one point, I will show her channel about how we need to embrace these people coming to us and not to browbeat them, because we need them in our side to get things taken care of. So I do understand what she's talking about here, with regards to the black community, because there are elements where the blacks have really recognized, okay, in this fight, our position needs to be very nuanced, because there are some discussions we should not be a part of, because this is a mess they created. They need to fix it and figure it out themselves. So that's where I think she's coming from with this. And I fully get what she's saying here.
Hmm. They're now realizing that it's not really a left versus right, right? That it's a top versus down. They're just not realizing it. And they're realizing it because Donald Trump's policies are tagging their asses. They are suffering. Hmm. And that suffering has helped them to open their eyes. There's another hashtag, the awakening. Black people, I really don't think this has anything to do with us, because they are talking about coming together for their rights, human rights, those types of things. We've always been on that. Every time we stepped into the voting booth, we were voting for everyone, including racist MAGA Republicans. We knew when we went into the voting booth on November 5th, we knew Donald Trump's policies was going to rip this country apart. We knew that if Donald Trump got back into office, that MAGA would be hurting. They went into the voting booth thinking that Donald Trump's policies was only going to be hurting us, the immigrants. Mhm. They went into the voting booth to vote for policies to hurt us. Now they're learning what we were saying. Donald Trump's policies will hurt everyone.
And this is what I want to kind of bring up here, is that, it's, she's not saying she's not part, they're not along with the purple movement. She's telling her community that we've done the work, we've been doing the work, let them figure it out and catch up, and I fully get that. However, one of the things I do want to bring out is she is saying black people as in a huge big brush black people, but the problem is there is a percentage of blacks who are Trumpers, who have gone against the community by voting for Trump. So it's not all black people. So, let's we need to recognize we're not talking monolith here. She's being very nuanced in how she's addressing it.
And so now they're afraid of losing their rights. Now they're afraid of not being able to pay their bills. Now they're afraid of not being able to put food on the table. And so they want to come together. They want to unify. to try to beat this regime, try to hold on to whatever rights they have, to be able to put food on the table. They want to come together to fight against the elite at the top in the Donald Trump regime. But we've always been on that. This is a revolution amongst themselves. This is a conversation that they need to have amongst themselves. I think we just need to sit back and continue to live life and do what we've been doing. We've always been on the right side of things. We've always seen Donald Trump and all of those before him what they were about. We tried to tell them. The one guy with the Purple Revolution handle, I just watched him do a video holding himself accountable for how he has behaved as a Trump supporter. He's holding himself accountable. He is apologizing. He has called out black people, apologizing to black people and other people. But even though their goal is to unify, to topple the regime, what steps do you plan to take in order to do that? They don't want to make it political. I saw one guy say, it's not about politics, not about policy. Well,
it's absolutely about politics.
To topple the regime? How do you plan to hold on to your rights? You have to vote in order to do that. You have to make your voice heard. So you don't want to talk about politics. You don't want to talk about that. But how do you plan to do that? In the end, he said, by any means necessary, whatever they need to do. Okay, well, that includes voting. That includes looking at policy. So the one guy, he makes more sense than some of the other videos that I've seen. I saw another video where the guy was talking about human rights for all. That means for immigrants in this country. That means for members of the LGBTQIA plus community. That means members of the black community. He went down the line. Human rights for all. All lives are to be respected. So some of them get it, but some of them talking about this purple revolution don't. Mm-hmm. It's going to take a combination of things. Are you willing to step up to vote the Republican Party out? Because that's where the problem lies. Are you able to admit that the people that you've been voting for have brought us to this point? Too many of the videos that I've seen have been talking about both sides. Yeah, the Democrats got issues, but the Democrats never talked about taking away your rights. The Democrats have always fought for health care.
And let's not get it twisted. Democrats, at least, are in the business of governing. Republicans have abandoned that long ago. And everyone needs to fucking own up to that and call it what it is.
So, black people, y'all let me know. I ain't got nothing to do with this purple revolution. I don't trust any of these MAGA people, former MAGA people. I don't trust them at all. I'm not downing what it is that they are trying to do. I think it's a good thing that their eyes are opening. I think it's a good thing that they want to take action. I think it's a good thing that they want to create this purple revolution. I just don't think it's my business. They need to work amongst themselves. They were the issue. They were the ones terrorizing black people. They were the ones terrorizing the people on the left. So, I won't be part of a purple revolution. I don't even want to deal with leftists. No, I don't want to deal with leftists. I don't trust leftists either. So I hope that they can get it together to make an impact, to help us move past this. I want that for them. And for anybody that's on the left, that's a Democrat, that feel that they can move with these people to help get them to the place where they need to be so that change can happen, more power to you. I encourage you to do that. I'm just not the one who's going to do it. I don't trust them. Mm-mm. Nope. Maya Angelou told me, once they show you who you are, believe them the first time.
Speak, Sister Tabitha, speak. Yeah, I fully agree with her there. I think this is something that predominantly the white community needs to atone for. They need to recognize the damage that they have caused in the quest for their grievances when they have held the narrative for far too long. And I say this as a person of color, as a native, and as a Mexican. I say this very clearly. I do not hold the same spaces that they do. Now, I am lighter complected, so I pass to a great degree. But don't think for a second, I don't think about all the others behind me who don't have this option. They're forefront in my mind. So, okay, so I'm going to switch gears just slightly. We're going to go to the More Perfect Union channel that I spoke about yesterday. I found this really fascinating in that a lot of these chain restaurants like Applebee's and Chili's and all of these restaurants, thank God our TGIF, thank God it's Friday, and Hard Rock Cafe and all that stuff, that certain appetizers and things are starting to all taste the same. And this video kind of explains why that is.
I've had a sense that lots of restaurants are starting to taste the same. And maybe you too have had a sense that something is amiss. So I wanted to test a hypothesis with my coworkers that you can be served the same exact food.
Can I just get the jalapeno poppers?
From totally different restaurants.
The fried pickles. Can I get the fried pickles?
But made in the same factory, whether you wanted it or not.
Can I get the funnel cake fries?
Here's the question behind this test. Are we trapped into eating the same mediocre food from New York to Alaska? And if so, why? And who's behind it?
All right, moment of truth.
That's the mystery we're going to unpack today.
To get to the bottom of it, first I went to Harlan, Iowa, woke up at 5 a.m. to talk to a restaurant owner about how they get their food.
I'm Ellen Walsh-Roseman, and I own Milk and Honey.
The thing is, Ellen's restaurant does it differently than most restaurants in 2025. She showed me how she makes something from scratch for French toast. She uses a distributor to get most base ingredients, the milk from a local dairy and the eggs from a local farm, Ellen's. The bread is brioche that the restaurant makes from scratch. From there, the brioche gets baked, cut, dipped in homemade custard, griddled, and served to you, the customer. Or, luckily enough, me.
It's very good.
It's not just the French toast. Ellen tries to work with as many local producers as possible.
This is our country skillet, and this is the local sourdough bread from a bakery in Omaha.
But for many restaurants, sourcing local ingredients like this is getting harder and harder. Ellen's distributor is regional and employee-owned. But if you're a restaurant owner, especially in a rural area, you might just have one or two distributors to choose from. There's a good chance one of them is a company called Sysco. And they are suspect number one for my deep fried mystery. To hash out that suspicion, I spoke to Austin Frerick, author of the book Barons, who explained the profound way Sysco is shaping the way we eat out.
The innovation of Sysco was that it was the first national company to essentially offer everything a restaurant needs.
Back in the day, someone like Ellen might have one distributor for butter and another for eggs. But Sysco is what's called a broadliner, supplying
everything from paper products to meat and produce.
Sysco was a merger of 9 different wholesale restaurant distributors with kind of the explicit goal of making a national player.
That was in 1969. Fast forward to today, and Sysco has grown so much that it really only has 2 other competitors in the national space.
Among them, Sysco is the largest, and even a decade ago, controlled an estimated 35% of the market. And this year, their gross profit hit $15 billion.
The scary thing about Sysco was it didn't become this giant through organic growth, but instead it became a giant through relentless acquisitions that went unchecked.
They've acquired over 150 companies to become really one of the only national broadline distributors for restaurants.
And this growth, I learned, is deeply changing the way we eat, from farm to table. Let's start with the farm part. Ellen tries to work with as many local producers as possible, even when it's more expensive. Sysco, on the other hand, operates with the biggest producers at massive scales to eke out savings. Producers that often have some of the most exploitative production models. Sysco gets their berries from companies like Driscoll.
Driscoll's basically took the Nike sweatshop model and applied it to berry production.
And chicken from companies like Tyson.
Tyson's applied a sharecropping model to meat production.
If you used a national distributor, could you get the Omaha sourdough? Could you get, no? And why is that?
So a lot of local distributors or local producers are not able to tap into regional distribution. The volume and production quantities is too high.
Sysco scours the globe for a good deal, and there's reason to be concerned about how they're getting some of those deals.
Seafood is the best example of this. Many providers to Sysco have been accused of engaging in slave labor.
That includes forced Uyghur and North Korean labor in China.
Basically, any dark part of the food system has moved offshore, which makes policing it really, really hard to do.
But Sysco doesn't just source shrimp and strawberries. They have their own line of mass-manufactured frozen foods. Everything from sourdough and brioche to, as I learned from researching this, jalapeno poppers, other fried appetizers, and desserts. Frozen food, it turns out, isn't just a facet of the Sysco business model, it drives it.
I don't think Americans appreciate that frozen food allows these long exploitative supply chains.
In the early 2000s, Sysco was buying jalapeno poppers assembled in Mexico for well below minimum wage and shipped frozen all over the country.
It allows a race to the bottom in terms of labor standards and pay.
So the food we ordered could have come to a distribution center like this, frozen, shipped to restaurants across the country, then dumped into a fryer. And now, the truckers driving those shipments, they're also getting squeezed by Sysco.
Sysco's continuously lobbying year after year to deregulate the trucking industry. And what we've seen since the 1980s is trucking wages are down nearly 40%.
Now, what I want to highlight here is that you're seeing how the practices of one company is having a ripple effect across multiple sourcers and suppliers and distributors chains that break out from what's going on. So not only is there the actual local producers who collect the stuff, who do it at a substantial loss or substantial discount in labor costs, but then they funnel all of that food into these different ones, and they also have an influence, in this case, going after the truck drivers. So, that's how it all works. And all of that is to increase their own profit over other businesses that are also trying to make a profit.
After the food is unloaded off of trucks, it gets cooked up and put on your plate. And Sysco's dominance means the food on that plate is increasingly the same and increasingly worse.
Do you think regional variety is disappearing?
Yeah, I would say so.
You've probably had a Sysco meal without even realizing it. They offer everything from these sad bread rolls to Wagyu beef burger patties. If you've ever spent time in a hospital or a prison, you might have had a meal off of a Sysco truck. And if you pay attention, they're everywhere. And so it's getting harder and harder to avoid getting the exact same frozen meal at your local diner or brewery. It probably won't taste that great either.
If you were to buy pre-made brioche from one of the big national distributors,
They probably will try to keep things cheap, so like they're probably not going to use butter.
so they'll use like a canola oil or
Shortening or something like that.
Yeah.
And then like their sugar might be like processed sugar, like a high fructose corn syrup kind of thing.
Austin found a story of a Pennsylvania diner whose burgers weren't frying the same on the grill. When the owner investigated, he realized the patties now contained soy protein filler. Sysco and their competitors are flooding restaurants with ultra-processed food like this. Now, you might expect that with a deep-fried cheddar jalapeno popper, but maybe less so with something like bread.
The irony is, you could be a diner in a small town in Iowa, surrounded by some of the world's best farmland, and yet nothing on the menu is coming from around you. It's low-quality products produced by people being exploited outside the national borders.
The system isn't exactly working out for restaurant owners or local distributors either.
With the competition bought out, Sysco has more leverage to arbitrarily raise prices. During COVID, for instance, they used their market power to pass on inflation to their customers and increase their earnings by 159%. Sysco CEO even said on an earnings call that they had no intention of competing on price.
Smaller restaurants have almost no negotiating power with Sysco. And so if you are in a rural area where there, aren't any other distributors, then restaurants really don't have many options at all. As we've lost some of that regional wholesale infrastructure, we also see the loss of local businesses, local farms, and a regional food system.
In general, restaurant owners have little recourse when Sysco screws them over. Complaints are rampant about late deliveries, crushed eggs below stacks of boxes, even swapping ingredients without informing restaurants. As the industry continues to consolidate, these issues will only get worse.
And I think that this is something that we need to recognize is that, restaurant industry is complaining about fall off from people not going out to eat much anymore. And I think it's a twofold problem. One, it's uber expensive, and that's Cisco's fault because they're charging the restaurants more for it. So the restaurants have to pass those additional costs onto their customer. Therefore, it drives it down. Then what they do is they will then have a quick sale on some kind of thing to get people in the door. But then as soon as that sale is over, then all the people leave again. So it's just this vicious cycle. And we need to understand that our restaurant owners and even Sysco needs to understand they're pricing themselves right out of the market. They're not going to be able to hang on if nobody's going. If all it seems is that it's easier to make shit at home, that's what people will do. That's just where it's going to go.
Sysco already tried to buy their largest competitor, US Foods, but was shut down by the FTC.
Now, Sysco's two largest competitors are signaling they might try to merge. In an environment where the biggest companies aggressively push out competition, makes sense. It also means restaurants will have even less choice than they already do, and farmers will have less bargaining power when selling their food.
The most aggressive, gold standard thing that an antitrust enforcer could do would be to look at some of these deals and say, maybe we went too far. Like maybe we let Sysco acquire too many companies and we should unwind some of those and break up Sysco. That's something that we've seen antitrust enforcers take on with past deals like Ticketmaster.
The FTC could also block future acquisitions, and states and federal regulators could scrutinize discount programs that people like Claire and Austin suspect Sysco is using to drive out the competition.
But let's be clear about it. With this current administration, do you think that's really going to happen when he's gutted so much of the investigators and people who are in these agencies, all for the sake of, trying to open things up for everyone? It's bullshit. All it is they're trying to get their rich CEOs even richer by stifling any kind of competition. Don't get it twisted. Don't fall into that trap.
But what about my mission to get the same food in entirely different states? We ordered a mix of jalapeno poppers, fried pickles, and funnel cake fries in Nebraska, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and in Alaska. All right,
moment of truth.
jalapeno popper.
never been to this restaurant, never been to the city, but it just tastes like something I've had 100 times.
In Omaha, I am pretty sure I got the Cisco brand jalapeno popper, though, to be fair, their main competitor sells almost the same thing. The one that I got in Brooklyn was clearly different than that one and was a little bit better. Here in New Jersey, I ordered funnel cake fries. They seem exactly the same as the ones I got in Omaha. A fellow producer also ordered them in Philadelphia and another in Anchorage.
They look pretty similar. I also ordered some fried pickles, which is what my fellow producer ordered in Philly. They're clearly different. One is chips, one is spears, but there's a chance that I got these Cisco pickle spears.
Don't get me wrong. You've probably had a frozen Cisco meal and thought it was totally fine. But the point is, in this giant food system, something is being lost. Regional variety, local jobs, local businesses, and just having a unique meal, a meal that's different.
And there we go. So leave your comments down below what you think about this with regards to where restaurants are going, especially chain restaurants. Now, the interesting thing is I went to a retirement party not too long ago, and we were at the 94th Squadron, which is a chain of restaurants that are predominantly near airports because they have a lot of World War II memorabilia and stuff up on the wall. So they kind of just have all of that going for it. And I have to tell you, the burger that I ordered there was unbelievably good. It was like I got slapped back into the late 70s when meat really tasted like real beef. And it was truly mind-blowing. I ended up paying $18 for that burger dinner with fries, and I didn't care because it tastes so good. And the brioche bun was clearly made in-house. It had incredible flavor. All of the ingredients were fresh. So I'm, there are some holdouts that are still chains, but they still have quality control. And they're sourcing, I think, locally because the freshness just was off the charts. So if you live near one, give them a try. Let me know what you find out when you go to yours. Mine's here in San Diego, and it was stellar. My mom had the French onion soup and salad, and my sister had the pulled pork sandwich, and the meat that was piled in that pulled pork had to be that thick. I mean, it was phenomenal. Great food, great food, and great ambiance, and just an overall winner of a place to go. I'm really, really pleased with them. All right, jumping into a different track. Let's talk about how things are going to get a lot more expensive. Now, Peter Zeihan is somebody that I follow fairly religiously. I find his takes to be rather interesting because they're pretty much based on populist dynamics and population distribution. And that has a lot to do with where societies are going, which ones are on the point of collapse, just because the birth rates are so low. It's also a consideration why you have people in this country in the Trump regime, which is really caught up with why birth rates are so low. There is a reason to be concerned about it. No doubt about it. Italy is one of the worst. Their birth rates are so low that it's Peter's opinion that he doesn't see them coming back from it. So, we may have a very, very small Italian population in short order, which is also why they're offering American Italians to move back to the mother country. So that's a kind of a interesting way to deal with your population control. All right, so let's hear what Peter has to say about why things in America are only going to get much worse.
Hey all, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from Colorado. Today we're talking about the newest hit to the American economy. We now have tariffs on cabinetry, semi-trucks, and what was the third one? Name brand drugs, all of which have been classified as national security threats. Cabinetry, that's an interesting one. Anyway,
how could that be security threat?
We could pick apart this all day, but I'm going to focus on the trucks because that's the one we're all going to feel soon and most deeply. Right now, about 90% of all cargo, all ton miles of cargo that are transported to the United States are transported on the roads by semi-trucks. Now, it didn't used to be this way. If you go back to the Depression, we had something called the Jones Act, the Interstate Commerce Act, which said that any cargo transported between any two American ports, regardless of where they were, had to be on a ship that was American built, American captained, American crewed, and American owned. As a result, we saw the cost of transport on the waterways increase in terms of cost per 10 mile by a factor of 5. And we went from transporting most of our goods, and especially most of our intermediate manufactured goods, especially in places like the Great Lakes and the upper Midwest, we went from that being the dominant mode of transport to basically whittling away to today. In terms of ton miles, we only use our waterways for about 1% of our total cargo. It has been, in my opinion, the stupidest law that the United States has ever adopted, and it's now been in place for a century. As a result, things went to places where those restrictions were not in place, first with train and now with truck. Now with the Trump administration policy, there's 100% tax on those trucks, of which about 80% of the imports come from Mexico, another 10% from Canada. And as with anything that involves NAFTA, nothing that's just made in one of the three countries. It's an integrated supply chain that uses all three. So basically what we're doing with this new tariff is saying this multi-step supply chain that we have, where parts of the trucks go back and forth among the three countries. If the finished product is actually done in Mexico, which is the relatively low-cost work, we will then tariff the cost of the entire truck when it comes back. So in essence, we're tariffing American workers and American companies who are making American products who just happen to have the bumper stamped on in Mexico. And since 90% of our cargo is transported by heavy truck, you're going to feel this in every sector. It doesn't matter if you're a hog farmer in Iowa sending your hogs to market, or if you are just ordering something on Amazon, it's getting shipped across the country. The only people who will not feel this are the people who are in a physical position where supply chains for imported goods do not use the trucks. And that means you would have to be in one of the major port cities that has a mega port. So those are New York, New Jersey, Miami, Houston, Savannah, Tacoma, and LA Long Beach. Anyone else, this is going to hit everything that you consume. So I have long said that the Jones Act is the dumbest law we've ever had, but it's got some competition now.
There we go. So buckle up, kids. It's only going to get worse. And I'm sure that's what you wanted to hear, right? All right, so moving on to why is the manosphere dumping Trump? And I find these discussions to be quite enlightening because primarily we're talking white cis het men. That's literally what we're focusing on here. So
the Trump administration is facing a legal standoff over its push to deploy National Guard troops to Democrat-led cities, including Chicago and Portland. Illinois
and he's
Oregon
doing this with Jessica
calling
Tarloff
the
from
deployments
Fox. She's
patently
the
unlawful, and a federal judge
channel.
recently blocked troops from going to Portland, calling the president's claims about unrest simply untethered to the facts. Meanwhile, White House aide Stephen Miller insists the administration has other options to send federal resources, framing the situation as a fight against what he calls domestic terrorism. Just with polls showing most voters disapprove of the Guard deployments, could these actions backfire politically for Trump?
Hi, everyone. As you can tell, because it's only been a few minutes, this is just a preview of the full episode, which is over on the Raging Moderates YouTube channel. Hope that you'll pop over there and subscribe, of course. There should be a pop-up on your screen that you can click on to get there, youtube.com
Definitely follow them.
/ Raging Moderates. And this is the place where you're also going to get all the extra content on top of the Wednesday, Friday pods. So come hang. I think we need to reassess what politically means for Trump. So, are the Republicans going to lose the midterms? Sure, I think that should happen, and historically that is what happens. I hope that it's a decent sized majority and not just a couple of seats in our direction. But that's one thing. And then there's politically backfire in are we going to have Americans all over the country in the streets? where maybe not every day, but you have a lot of No Kings protests, which are happening far too sporadically, I think, for the overreach that this government is, putting upon us on.
I would tend to agree. I think they need to happen more than they are. Maybe they'll ramp up as we get closer to the midterms, if we have a midterms. Keep that in mind.
A daily basis. Certainly if you live in one of their target areas, like in a Portland or a Chicago, Los Angeles. And I'm not sure that the anger that you get in the conversations with people about what's going on is translating into these tangible events that the administration is going to have to take notice of. Like, the courts are doing their jobs and they're ruling against him, left, right, and center. But then they find another way to get to where they're going. And Stephen Miller is very crafty, right? And Russ Vought is very crafty. And I'm kind of surprised, having watched a ton of footage of what is going on in Chicago, I'm not sure if you saw this video, but 2 ICE officers got out of a regular car, like just an SUV, and are trying to cuff a migrant, or who I presume was a migrant. And everyone got out of their cars, started filming them and screaming at them. And eventually, after like 7-8 minutes, they gave up, right? Yeah. So that's what life is like in Chicago right now. And I, walking through downtown New York City, and, we're like-minded and kind of akin cities, right, to Chicago. And it's like, that people are on their phones, calling people, texting people, saying, I can't believe he's doing this or that. But you feel like the moment should be bigger, I guess, in the rest of the country, and I'm not feeling that yet. And so the politics of an election is one thing, but the politics of how the American populace writ large responds to an authoritarian power grab by the Trump administration has not been severe enough for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember someone saying they were outraged at the lack of outrage on an issue 5 or 10 years ago. And just a quick call out. We just got off with Governor J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, discussing this exact issue. And for those of you who want to see that and other quick takes, please go to our Raging Moderates YouTube channel and subscribe. But it's difficult to figure out where the red line is. And what's interesting is that what felt like the censorship of a late night talk show host appeared to foment more outrage than people being literally rounded up by people in masks. I would have not guessed that. I mean, let's just provide some context here. They call them undocumented workers. These people have documents like no tomorrow. They have phone contracts, they have driver's licenses, they have insurance agreements, they have W-2s, they have Social Security
numbers.
Yeah, they have tax payment stubs. They file their taxes because we want to pay their taxes. They have bank accounts such that American banks can make money off of the float. They have credit cards issued by Comerica and Visa such that they can get their 2 or 3%. They have documents coming out of their asses. Mm-hmm. And speaking of asses, these are the people that have been wiping grandma's ass such that you can afford to keep her at home, and such you can afford to take your wife out to eat because restaurants are much less expensive, and you can have a home for $400,000 instead of $700,000 because, folks, domestic workers will no longer work outside. They just won't. As someone who has renovated a bunch of homes, the only domestic workers who will now have anything to do with home construction, as far as I can tell, are plumbers and electricians. If you go outdoors, it's all immigrants / I would imagine undocumented workers. And we have let this go on for 40 years because it's ultimately, at the end of the day, one of the most flexible, economically prosperous workforces in history. Now, did we take it too far and let 250,000 come across the border and raise their hand and say asylum and let them in during December of 23 under the Biden administration? Absolutely. But to see this now, to see people in masks rounding up gardeners, housekeepers, restaurant workers, people who've been here 10, 20 years, and also my understanding is a non-zero number of citizens.
Yeah.
They have to be incarcerated for 72 hours before they finally work through the system and they get released. I went to one of these high-end Masters of the Universe conferences, and I met kind of a household name anchor, and this person said their partner had left the country, not because their partner wasn't a citizen, this person is, but had migrated from another country and had serious anxiety about them or someone in their family being rounded up incorrectly.
Right.
So this is just creating a vibe that is so unhealthy and so ugly. And I would argue, in terms of national security, that this is just such an enormous fucking distraction that we're deploying our troops. I like using our troops aggressively. I don't think there's any reason to spend $1 trillion on the military unless you're going to actually use it. I don't think it's just a deterrence force. But instead of deploying troops to Portland, shouldn't we be figuring out a peacekeeping force in Gaza? Shouldn't we be providing hardware and the ability to launch long-range Tomahawk missiles into the oil infrastructure in Russia? Instead, we have these guys at a donut shop in Portland. We have our troops. By the way, I've heard anyone who talks to our troops, not ICE, but our troops, the troops don't know what the fuck they're doing there. They are not happy about this. ICE, unfortunately, when you tell guys, hey, do you want to abuse immigrants and get to wear a mask? That is a whistle for some very strange individuals.
Let's not get that twisted. We're talking Proud Boys. We're talking Oath Keepers. We're talking neo-Nazis. That's who is answering that call. Okay? Let's not try to obfuscate that in any way, shape, or form. These are not trained professionals. These are cosplaying little dick energy men. Okay?
Your thoughts, Jess?
Totally. I mean, you're wondering what like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and those types of people could be doing in the year 2025. Taking that $50,000 bonus to get to sign up and go work for ICE, I think would be pretty high on that list. And you're absolutely correct about the rounding up of American citizens. We have a lawsuit out of Alabama, an American citizen who has been arrested not once, but twice. A construction worker who even had real ID to present. I know rich people in New York City who haven't bothered to get down to the DMV to get their real IDs, but this guy, totally compliant with the law, has his ID even, they don't care. So that lawsuit out of Alabama, we'll see what happens there. You had the raid on the south side of Chicago, that apartment complex where they're using Black Hawk helicopters and they're pulling American citizens and allegedly Tren Aragua members out of their beds as if they are the same. There are kids on the street, unclothed, partially clothed, zip tying these kids together. I'm sure there was some bad shit going on in that apartment complex too, but it is a complete infringement on your constitutional rights that they can just show up and haul you out of your bed. There is no reason, having watched the interviews that these people who live in the complex are giving, that anyone who works for ICE or CPB who was executing this thought that those people were undocumented. Those are people who have lived on the south side of Chicago their entire lives. And yeah, I'm surprised there isn't more outrage and that it is not being channeled in the right direction. And you're also completely right to highlight the fact that like there's real crime going on in this country. And we are moving people off of investigating drug smuggling, sexual exploitation, and organized crime to redirect them to this effort because Stephen Miller thinks that we need to arrest 3,000 people a day because that was just some number that he came up with. And we're for the pro-law enforcement party, it's a complete farce. I don't know if you saw this as well. Like Donald Trump didn't even know that his administration had taken $187 million out of New York's counterterrorism budget. Kathy Hochul had to call Trump, tell him what happened, said he had no idea that this had happened.
Of course he didn't. He's not interested in governing. The GOP is not interested in governing. They are interested in pillaging, raping, and completely decimating the American institutions. That's what it is. That's literally what it is. All right, so that's a preview of what's going on here. I think one of the things that this is just a clip of what they're talking about here. The full one is up, and it's also called Why the Manosphere Bros Are Dumping Trump, and it's a 42-minute long episode, so definitely go check it out. But we will move on to our next one, and this is rather interesting. I watched about half of this. And actually, before we go any further, I'm going to pause here for a moment. I need to run to the restroom. I should have done this before we started, but I was out there waiting for my sandwich to arrive. So I'm going to be right back. Okay, hang on. And I'm back. Okay, so let's pick up with where we were. I found this to be rather interesting, and it really kind of points out what I've been saying all along, that I think our social media has done the greatest disservice, and I think even smartphones to a great degree. Now, if they had just made it a camera phone with some texting capabilities, but I think all these apps and stuff, I think this has been the real problem, especially social media apps. So let's see what Caddy K has for us with this one.
Over the last 20 years, there's been a huge drop in the number of parties that people are going to. In 2003, the average American spent 3 hours a month partying. Today, that number is just 90 minutes a month. In just 2 decades, we shrank our social lives down to just half of what they used to be.
It's about as dramatic as any statistic that I have seen in the last few years. The death of partying has been absolutely tremendous.
But the drop-off isn't equal for all age groups, and that's what's really concerning. The drops among young people are staggering. Their decline in partying isn't 50%, it's nearly 70%. What happens to a generation of kids, these young people who are just starting to learn how to socialize, how to talk to people, how to date? What happens to these kids when they stop having a social life of their own?
In the year 2000, Harvard's Robert Putnam published a very famous book called Bowling Alone, where he said Americans seem to be retreating and socializing less and working on their social capital less and creating groups less. And he had all of this data suggesting that Americans were beginning to retreat between the 1970s and the early 2000s from the physical world. Some people at the time said that Robert Putnam was full of it. They said, you're totally crazy. You're forgetting the fact that the internet's going to come along and it's going to bring us all together. I'm talking about a social phenomenon that's happened entirely since the publication of Bowling Alone. So Robert Putnam rang the bell of declining American socialization. Then some people said he might be wrong. And then partying among 15 to 24-year-olds declined by 70%. So it's almost like the best way to frame this is not as one phenomenon, but like a recession on top of a recession. We were already seeing a retreat from the physical world, a retreat from social capital and socializing in the second half of the 20th century, and now that retreat has just accelerated in the last 20 years.
Okay, I want to get into the whys and what can be done about it in a second, but give me some examples of what young men and young women are doing if they're not going out and going to parties and socializing with other people.
Well, we know exactly what they're doing. They're hanging out on their phones, they're playing video games, they're watching TV, and that's basically it. It's screens and screens and more screens. We're spending more time with glass
that part right there.
rather than spending time with people. And of course, the irony here is that I'm somewhat spending time with you, but I'm really just looking at my computer as we talk.
Which is exactly what I said. I get the irony of me saying don't be on social media on a social media platform.
It is difficult, I think, for some sociologists to determine like how much of our social time is just being funneled into the internet and how much of this is us like truly being more alone in front of our phones. You know, one stat that I thought was very interesting is that Meta, in a recent FTC document, said that more than 90% of the time that people spend on Facebook or Instagram, they're not looking at their friends, they're essentially just watching videos. So even social media itself has essentially become television. I mean, a lot of this time, I think, that we are not spending with people that we know, we are spending with people that we don't know. There's a ton of academic evidence that suggests that while it is easy, especially these days, to be alone, right? To wake up and watch TV by yourself, to order the food, to come to your house, to work from home, to never get outside, to stay in your PJs. It is easy, it is convenient, but there is a curse to convenience. And when you ask a lot of these people whether they feel that their lives are meaningful, you find that a lot of the activities that are most convenient turn out to be least meaningful. Time with people, time outside of our home, tends to be the most meaningful time that we spend in our lives. And that strikes me, therefore, as a great social tragedy if we're doing less of it.
Okay, let's get back to young people, because based on kind of, you know, a traditional way of thinking, my parents' generation might well have said, wow, it's great that young kids are not spending time at parties. It's great that they're not out there drinking. And so I wanted to play you something. I want you to listen to something that Professor Scott Galloway, who I was speaking to a few weeks ago, said to me about this issue of partying.
And who we just heard from recently.
40% of all nightclubs in London have closed down because young people don't have money and there's an anti-alcohol movement. I think the risk to the 25-year-old liver of alcohol is dwarfed by the risk of anxiety and social isolation. My advice to young people, and I'm being somewhat humorous here, is to go out, get out of the house more, drink more, and make a series of bad decisions that might pay off.
it's kind of this counterintuitive moment, right? Listening to Scott Galloway, and yes, he says he's being somewhat humorous, but the trade-off of, okay, maybe young people aren't out there partying, and you have stats on how they're drinking less. Teenagers are drinking less in particular than they used to. And I think every parent, I'm the parent of 4 children, would say, well, that's a very good thing. And I'm very glad my teenagers are not drinking, and they definitely should be home studying in their books. But actually what you seem to be suggesting, and Scott Galloway seems to be suggesting, is that there is a downside even to not going out as a partying as a young teenager, as a young person, and giving up the social drinking that comes with it. And I don't really want to focus on the drinking. It's what that is emblematic of.
There's no question that young people today seem to value a certain kind of monkish attitude toward health. You know, they do fewer drugs than young people used to. They drink less alcohol than young people used to. They go to parties less. They get driver's licenses less. In all of these ways, you could say, you know, after stat, after stat, after stat, well, it sounds like childhood today, teenagerhood today is much safer than it used to be. And in a vacuum, you could certainly imagine that this would be purely good news. The reason I don't think that it's purely good news is that this shift in behavior has coincided with an enormous, in fact, record increase in solitude.
Yeah, which is a paradigm shift. So that's why there's upheaval. That's why it's suddenly become alarming to a lot of people, and that's why people are screaming about it. Again, when paradigms shift, when you have everybody in a society going very much in one direction, and then a generation cracks it and takes it in a different direction, that shift to less socializing, less drinking, less drug use, that tends to put everything in between those two avenues in a kind of a Venn diagram of chaos that goes on. And there's a lot of pushback, a lot of finger pointing. There's all kinds of stuff that happens in there. And I think it's really interesting. You know, I certainly went to a lot of parties when I was younger in the 80s and 90s. And because it was the thing to do, it was how you socialized. Then it became nightclubs, and you went clubbing with your friends and stuff and got shit-faced or what have you. But it also taught you social skills. It taught you how to deal with drama sometimes, because people get drunk, shit happens. And so you had to really learn and get your chops on social relationships by being in the thick of it. Nowadays, most of these kids in Gen Z and Gen Alpha are risk avertant, and they also don't like any contentious scenarios where you have to come face to face with something that can bring contention into your life. So, I just wanted to add that 2 cents in.
Right, the percentage of 12th graders going out with friends 2 or more times a week has declined from 80% in the 1980s to less than 60% today. Teens don't just spend more time alone, they have fewer friends. They spend less time with those friends. They go to parties less with those friends. And they're sadder, right? At the end of the day, if there was no evidence of a mental health crisis among young people, I think someone could reasonably say, Derek, it's absurd for you to care about this, right? It's actually kind of creepy for like a 30-something guy to care about the partying habits of American teens and 20s. Fair enough. But there is a mental health crisis, right? Rates of anxiety and depression and OCD and PTSD are skyrocketing for young people. And so this age of solitude that we're seeing has coincided with an age of sadness. And that's why I think it's really important to say, yes, it's good that young people aren't getting as plastered as they used to be, but at the cost, if that's coming at the cost of cutting off social connection, I'm not sure that trade-off is necessarily worth it.
But how do we then
Well
tackle
said.
the issue of the more people retreat socially, the more lonely they become, but the less socially skilled they also become, and therefore the risks of going out and socializing, of being rejected, of being humiliated, of having to introduce yourself to strangers, of having to have interaction with people who may not be interested in you, all of which for teenagers, I've had a bunch of teenagers myself, are exponentially seem exponentially greater. how do you then get them out there? Because they're the very ones who are going to find the process of getting out there even harder.
Right. I want to provide or suggest a frame here, which is social fitness. Right? When you think of physical fitness, you could use the exact same sort of negative spiral that you just described. If someone goes to the gym less, they'll be able to lift fewer weights. If they can lift fewer weights, they will it'll be harder for them to go to the gym and lift weights to get stronger, which will mean that outside of the gym, they'll get weaker, which makes it harder for them to lift weights at the gym. And you can imagine a kind of negative spiral, right, of muscles atrophying as people stay away from anything that involves physical exercise. The same, I think, is arguably true of social fitness as well, right? If you feel like, or even if you're diagnosed with social anxiety, you might spend less time around other people. That means the next marginal hangout with other people is going to feel more anxious because you have less practice. And that's just going to reify the idea that you have social anxiety, which therefore makes you less likely to go out to see other people again. And you can imagine yourself somewhat trapped in a kind of psychological spiral or a psychological prison of your own making.
Which also leads to, job losses because they're not socially adept at navigating office politics or their workplace politics. And that's part and parcel. The thing is, I think what has been the greatest disservice, when I came up as a Gen Xer, our parents were largely not around because more often than not, to put food on the table and a roof over your head, both parents had to work. So as Gen Xers, we kind of brought ourselves up with our friends. And it was a lot of experimentation. There was a lot of bumps and scratches and broken bones and all kinds of stuff that occurred, but it taught us life lessons. I don't know that the safety of play dates and that kind of stuff and being so in the middle of being a helicopter parent hovering over your kid and not allowing them this area of expression without a hovering parent worrying about every little facet of little Timmy's life. I think it's done a huge disservice to society at large because these are the very same kids who are easily cornswalloped and boondoggled and flummoxed by politicians who seem to give them everything that they're saying that they want in a politician, only to have the politician, once they've got their vote and are in the position they were voted in for, then turn around and completely ignore them. And then they go, what happened? So let's get back to the final parts because it's wrapping up.
Because you've decided that what you have is defining of you. You are defined by social anxiety. So I think in some ways it is really worth thinking about social fitness as akin to physical fitness. People schedule time at the gym. They tell themselves, even though I don't want to go to the gym, I don't want to get on the elliptical, I don't want to do Pilates, they still put it in their schedule. I wonder, frankly, if young people who in many ways seem incredibly ascetic and monkish should tell themselves that they should think about social fitness the same way they think about physical fitness. And think of it as akin to a healthy exercise they have to keep up with if they want to be a full, healthy person.
Derek, in that kind of context, and you're sort of pointing to some kind of path that people could follow out of this kind of crisis of loneliness and non-socializing, talk a little bit to parents of teenagers in today's world, because my impression is that parents today, even more than when my first child became a teenager 10 years ago, 15 years ago, are more anxious about their children. They're more protective. We keep them in a bubble. We don't want them to get unsafe.
They have play dates.
Their every movement on their cell phone.
Helicopter parents.
God forbid that they even, touch a drop of alcohol or a little bit of drugs or whatever it is. They're much less kind of laissez-faire than parents were in the kind of 90s and aughts, is my understanding and my kind of perception of it. So in a way, they are the worst parents.
There's that word, perception.
For the teenagers of today who are not partying. So what would you say, and you're too young to have teenagers yourself, I'm imagining, but if you had teenagers or if you were speaking to friends, parents who have teenagers, what would you say to them?
I'm thinking about this from the perspective of drinking, and I think there's a line in my article where I say that, of course, teen behaviors today might be good for their livers, but I'm not sure that in the broader context that they're not hanging out with people, this behavior is good for their hearts. Right? So the first thing that I would say is that to protect our kids, we sometimes need to know when to stop protecting our kids. Right? That a part of growing up is being able
allowing
to
them
having
to
the
make
freedom
mistakes.
to make the kind of
Mhm.
mistakes that Professor
Mhm.
Scott Galloway was talking about. That's thing number one. That I think true love requires an understanding that you cannot protect your children from everything, and that in fact too much protection is not
It's
protection,
detrimental.
right? You are keeping your children
That's right.
from developing the kind of life and life experiences and exoskeleton that is necessary, I think, to be a full and flourishing adult. That's number one. Number two, I think you're absolutely right about this shift that we've seen in parenting. You know, there was the latchkey era of the 1970s where parents were much more laissez-faire, and that coincided with a period of rising crime that I think made a lot of parents scared. And now a lot of parents in the 2000s and 2010s are the exact opposite of a latchkey parent. Rather than keep the doors unlocked and allow their kids to do, whatever kind of hitchhiking they want, instead all of the doors are locked, hitchhiking is banned, and we monitor their every move on our cell phones. If parenting can change in one direction, it can change in another direction, right? That is the nature of cultural change, right? What's the coolest kind of denim jean? Well, it's bell bottoms. No, it's skinny. No, now it's bell bottoms. No, now it's skinny. The same can be true of parenting. That the shift from latchkey parenting to intensive parenting can swing back towards something that's a little bit more lenient once we understand the costs of this era of parenting. And I think that we can see the costs all around us. Yes, young people are more cautious. They're more careful about what they put in their bodies. But that caution and care is extended to the physical world that they're simply not touching. They're not leaving their houses. They're not leaving their bedrooms. They're not going to parties. They're not making friends. They're not hanging out with the friends that they do make. And that is a kind of failure. And I think that Galloway is further right in suggesting that there's more to health than maximizing the performance of your liver on a day-to-day basis. There is a ton of evidence coming out that social connection is not only good for us cardiovascularly. There was actually just a study that came out of Northwestern finding that so-called super agers, people who in their 80s have the memory of someone in their 50s, that the thing that most correlated with super agers was social connection. It was people who had the most friends that through engagement with people in the physical world preserved their neurons in a way that was protective for dementia and Alzheimer's. So one of the bells that I'm trying to ring here is that rather than think that staying inside amounts to, or socializing less amounts to protecting our bodies, I would like us to entirely invert that, to recognize that social fitness is fitness, and being around other people might be absolutely essential to our bodies.
Okay, Derek, I'm going to go and open that bottle of wine.
I'm right there with you, Caddy. I was going to do the whole. Oops.
So Stephen Miller.
Okay, hold on. I think what we'll do is we'll end with Stephen Miller. I was going to do the thing with Noah, Trevor Noah, but I think I'm going to hold off on that, and we'll do that tomorrow. Tomorrow is also the time when I'm going to go through my vast library of queer media and tell you what my favorites are, whether or not I think they'll qualify for showing them to Albert as part of our reaction series. And you can take advantage of that reaction series by contributing 99 cents a month, less than $1 to us, and you get all of the full reactions. It's basically a watch along format, so I give you like the first minute of what we're watching so you can sync up your own copy with it. And then once you get it synced up, then we kind of fade out what we're watching, and then you just have our commentary. So like you can put the original thing up on your TV and have us on an iPad or an iPhone or whatever, or on your Android phone, and listen to our commentary and our reaction to what we're watching on the screen. So it's something to consider. And it would really help us out because there are costs involved in keeping this channel going. And we're not looking to be uber rich here. We just want it to be able to sustain itself. Vance and I have been paying for this out of pocket for our community as a resource of all queer content creation. And we encourage you to check out our interview series of queer content creators across all media. And definitely check out what they're doing. So I'm in the process of now starting to gear up to do all of the previous 7 years, because we started mid 7th season. So I have 6.5 years of audio only episodes that are going up. And I'm kind of waiting to see the AI thing drop from YouTube that will do B-roll creation based upon the conversation or based upon the text of what's being spoken. And I kind of want to see what that will do. I'm not so pro on using AI, but if it's sparingly and you're using it to highlight what somebody is talking about, I kind of want to see how that tool will work. So, but I do intend on putting up our previous 6.5 years, 7-ish years of our weekly episodes. So we have a ton of episodes that you still have not had exposure to, with a lot of great books, a lot of brilliant writers that are out there that you could definitely partaking in when you're looking for your next queer media purchase. So definitely check that out. So we're going to wrap up today with Off-Wagon's YouTube channel and his discussion about Stephen Miller. I love this guy. I love his take on stuff. So let's just see what he has to say.
So Stephen Miller went on CNN to do his best Mitch McConnell impression by going full blue screen, you know, spinny wheel of death like Windows XP after downloading the wrong porn file off of LimeWire. And he had that reaction all because he said the quiet part out loud, which is impressive because even quoting Hitler has never been the quiet part for Stephen Miller. If you haven't seen it, here's the clip.
You've called the district judge's ruling blocking the deployment of National Guard in Oregon legal insurrection. Does the administration still plan to abide by that ruling?
Well, the administration filed an appeal this morning with the Ninth Circuit. I would
just know that everything that man says is a lie when it comes out of his mouth. None of what he says is actually true.
note the administration won an identical case in the Ninth Circuit just a few months ago with respect to the federalizing of the California National Guard. Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority.
Stephen? Stephen? Hey, Stephen, can you hear me? It seemed, Stephen, I apologize. It seems like we're having a technical issue.
That's not a technical difficulty. That is the look of a man shitting his pants. Now, some of you may not be familiar with what plenary authority means, and then that's okay. My friend Miriam's gotcha. It means a complete, absolute, and unqualified authority. And while Cankle's Caligula is a completely and absolutely unqualified authority, that's not what this means. What he accidentally said here is that the president has complete, unquestioned authority to tell the U.S. military to do anything he wants them to do. And that is bullshit. See, right after we fought a whole war on the principle of telling a king to fuck off, the founders gave us a separation of powers in government so no one person would have king-like authority. So this is why it takes an act of Congress to declare war. This is why the judicial branch, judges, get to block unlawful acts by the president. Like when he tries to send the National Guard from other states to go occupy American cities. And there's damn sure nowhere in the Constitution that uses the words plenary, unqualified, absolute, any word of the sort, authority over the military. In fact, quite the opposite. Title 10 in the Constitution, as well as numerous other places, very specifically outline what the president can do with the U.S. military. And even within the limited scope where the president can federalize the National Guard and carry out domestic operations on U.S. soil with it, there are even further limitations within the execution of him doing that. See, governors are the commander-in-chief of their national...
And let's be clear, you know, when he talks about what they won the case in California, no, they didn't. It's still ongoing. What they won was they got a stay on the original decision and they sent it back to the judge, which was Stephen Breyer's brother, to actually further define and run through the gamut the legal arguments that the Trump administration is taking and further define it before they can, you know, see if whether or not the judge's position is sound. So they haven't won. They always say things that they're winning, but they're not winning. They're just continuing in that case.
Guard, so the president needs to go through the governor to give the orders to federalize them. And per the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution, you cousin fucking cosplatrians remember the Constitution, right? It's that document where that "We the People" sticker came from that you were so fond of you stuck it in the back of your clapped out gender-affirming Ford. So you just need to go ask the one guy in the trailer park who can kind of read the rest of the document for you. Not even the rest in this case, just down to the 10th one. This is the States' Rights Amendment. You know, the same amendment you dumb motherfuckers used to justify committing a terrorist terror attack and starting a war so you could own people, you know, because you all are such insufferable losers that you needed the government to legally make other people inferior to you to make you feel better about how pathetic you are. That amendment means that the president can't force a governor to follow his orders. See, what happened here when Stephen Miller froze like Grindr does every time Republicans get together is the last canary in our coal mine. He has clearly been talking repeatedly about how the president should have authoritarian power over the military. What these MAGA molesters have been doing over the past decade is slowly normalizing more and more radical and batshit ideas, one little step at a time. So all of these toothless two brain cells fighting for bronze bumfucks are like the frog in the boiling pot of water, getting more and more used to ideas that they would never have been able to stomach, which is why we've worked for, you know, just building the wall and then increasing ICE and Border Patrol and then sending ICE into everywhere and now sending the National Guard into towns, but just after the illegal brown people, getting them okay with each of these things that are absolutely government overreach, to the point where now plenary authority was the final solution, figuratively and probably literally. It's why Fox propaganda has been changing the rhetoric to talk about children in these ICE raids that have been put in danger and zip-tied and handcuffed and separated from their parents as human shields being used to protect, you know, illegal Venezuelan gang members that don't really exist. You see, because inevitably when ICE or the military that is occupying these U.S. cities shoot a child, and they know that this would cause outrage even from likely the most ardent branch Dumbvidians, they're trying to create the rhetoric and the narrative now to justify that eventual inevitability by saying that these people were just being used as human shields by these dangerous illegals, and it's not really ICE's fault, it's not really the National Guard's fault, it's those mythical illegal gang members' fault. And ICE and the National Guard have to be in these cities because they need to be defended from these dangerous terrorists, so that justifies ignoring the law completely, and any collateral damage that happens from your actions is their fault. And if you don't believe me that this is exactly what they're doing, just look at Israel, because Israel is using the exact same propaganda in real time. We had to blow up this school, we had to blow up this hospital, we had to level this apartment building, we had to murder all of the people in this refugee camp because Hamas was hiding there and they were just using these people as human shields, so it's really Hamas's fault. Remember how Antifa is a terrorist organization now? They're literally just like Mr. Bean over here copying Bibi's homework on this whole propaganda campaign. Because just like they blame Hamas for killing children and blowing up hospitals and doing all of that stuff, they are going to do the same thing here, and they are going to blame Antifa. And the next ingredient in the recipe they stole from Bibi was to add planetary authority and turn up the temperature. However, just like when Nazi Nosferatu watches other men bang his wife, he was a little premature there, and that's why he froze. Because he added it too soon, and now he's afraid that he's gonna burn dinner and the frog is going to jump out of the pot. So for the love of God, guys, jump out of the fucking pot, because if we sit here any longer, we are cooked. If the president is able to execute plenary authority over the U.S. military on U.S. soil, that is it, guys. There's no more checks and balances after that. There's no more off-ramps after that. That's boxcars, that's gas chambers, that's show me your papers, that's barbed wire at the borders, that's hiding children in attics whose diaries will be read by your grandchildren in history class, where they will raise their hand and ask their teachers, how did they ever let this get this far? How did they let this happen? We've been warning you about this for years. This is where it's going. Stephen Miller just confirmed it by accident, and he knew it. That's why he froze. It has gotten to the point where it is them or us, and if we freeze now, it will be us.
There you go. I think that that's something that we do need to pay heed to, because, you know, when they do tell on themselves. That's the thing. They tell on themselves. They say every single time what they're going to do, and people on the MAGA side have always just said, oh, well, they don't really mean that. No, motherfucker, they mean it. Just like Maya Angelou said when Tabitha spoke about it at the beginning of this broadcast, where she said, you know, when they tell you who they are, believe them. That's exactly what Trump did. And none of these dumb motherfuckers, these trailer park bimbos and trash heads, they have no fucking brain cells operating in their heads. They took everything they said as rote, and they believed it wholeheartedly until it came to visit them. And now it's different. No, motherfucker, it was always this way. You were just glad that it was happening to other people. So that's where we're going to leave it today. I got to get to my sandwich because I'm sure it's as soggy as sin right now. But do want to thank you all for taking the time to watch this. If you have any comments, please put them down below. I will try to read them, and maybe I'll address some of them in the next broadcast, which is tomorrow from 6 to 8. And tomorrow I will be going through my queer media library and showing which movies, and I have a ton of them. I have over, I think, almost 1,000 of them by now, that are my favorites and why. And I have some stories about some of them that I can relate to. So be looking forward to doing that. And I think I'll kind of do something along the lines of queer media focus on Fridays. So yeah, that's kind of what's on deck for tomorrow. I will show the nuanced answer by Trevor Noah tomorrow at the beginning, just so we get it out of the way. I didn't want to skip it, but I'm kind of deciding I'm going to end this right here, right now. So we'll do that first as first order of business once I sign on tomorrow at 6 o'clock. So from 6 to 8 p.m., Monday through Friday, I will be here. And I welcome you to come join me. And I have the chat window open. You can always ask questions. We can always have a dialogue about this. So just be respectful and know that this is a queer safe space. So from all of us at Rope Podcast, I wish you a wonderful evening, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Okay? Take care.